Hola estudiantes, este es una revisión de la lección número 2. This is going to be a review for lesson number 2 and the theme of our lesson number 2 is En la Universidad. We have as our goals to learn about talking about school life, discussing everyday activities, ask questions in Spanish, and describe the location of people and things. So expect to see those topics as our main grammar points for this unit, and as well the vocabulary related to la universidad. So as you know, this is coming from your e-companion, Portales 1, and this is going to be lesson number 2. And if you want to find the full vocabulary for this lesson, this is going to be on page 76. So as I previously said, all our themes and topics for this unit is going to be coming from or related to la vida en la universidad. So we're talking about the classmates and the subjects and many other words relevant to this theme. So I suggest you to go to page 76 and learn the vocabulary for this lesson, and as well remember to use the flashcards provided in Portales number 1, VHL Central. So let's go and get into our grammar point 2.1, which is present tense of Ar verbs. So far we know that we have different groups of verbs in Spanish, and we are going to know where each verb goes because we have a group ending in AR, one group ending in ER, and one group ending in IR. So before we talked about verbs ser and estar because they conjugate in different ways and they are irregular, but this time we're going to focus on regular verbs. Especially we have these three groups. As I said, you're going to tell the group by the ending that you see in each verb. So in here we have the example of verb estudiar. That is an example of AR ending. Comer, ER. And escribir, IR. So what happens in here is that we're going to look specifically at verbs ending in AR because they're going to have a different conjugation than the rest of the verbs. So if you look in here, we're working with verb estudiar. Now in English, we don't see this as evident because we don't have different conjugations for different people. We have just a few different ways to conjugate, and that's when we say I study, you study, she studies, and that's where this verb changes. But we keep going with we study, you all study, they study. So we don't really see this pattern of change in English. But in Spanish, you're going to see that happening for every single person that you talk about. So you have to make sure who you are talking about in order to match the verb or the conjugation of that verb to that person. So for example, if you say, if you're talking about yourself, you study, then you're going to say yo estudio, tú estudias, él, ella or usted estudia, nosotros estudiamos, vosotros estudiáis, ellos, ellas, ustedes estudian. So I want you to pay attention to this box because you're going to see the ending in yellow and in bold because that means that these are going to be consistent. So whenever we have regular verbs, we usually have particular endings that we can use to every single verb that goes into that category. So for example, if we talk about any other regular AR ending verb, they are all going to be conjugated this way. So it is important that you know if the verbs that you're looking at are regular or not. And we're going to give some more examples coming up. So in here we have three different verbs. We have estudiar, we have bailar, and we have trabajar. Okay? So we're going to begin with, we're going to end up with, let's say, something that we call a verb stem. We're going to get rid of that AR at the end, and we're going to keep that stem. Estudiar is going to become estudi, and then we're removing that AR. Bailar, trabajar. Okay, so now what's next? Then you have to pay attention to whoever you're talking. Like I mentioned before, if you're talking about a she, if you're talking about my brother, who is a he, if I'm talking about myself, if I'm talking about a group of people. So you have to know who you're talking about to know what ending is going to go there. And now let me go back a little bit. We're talking about these endings, okay? So remember to take the stem and then plug in that ending that you need based on the person you're talking about. If I'm talking about my sister, I'm going to say that she studies. Ella estudia. Mi hermana estudia. Now I want to say that she works. Mi hermana, and then I see that the ending is going to be a. Mi hermana trabaja, and I'm going to plug in here a. Mi hermana trabaja. Yo trabajo. Yo bailo. Yo estudio. Tú bailas. Tú estudias. Tú trabajas. Okay, so I think that by now you're starting to see that pattern. Now we have a list of common AR verbs in here. And then I'm going to leave that to you to look at these verbs. But we have verbs like bailar, caminar, descansar, practicar, tomar, viajar, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to leave this to you. Please go to that slide and make sure that you know the verbs in here. Now remember, when you want to conjugate, you only have to get rid of that ending and then plug in the ending that you need based on the person you're talking about. Okay? Now, if you want to make this sentence negative, you're going to use no. So just forget about this no for now. And then if we want to make a positive statement, I'm going to say, Alicia desires to dance now. Alicia desea bailar ahora. What about if she doesn't want to? Then I'm going to say, Alicia no desea bailar ahora. As you can see, we're going to plug in this in front of the verb. We have another statement in here. Deseo hablar con el señor Díaz. Now, what about I don't want to? No deseo hablar con el señor Díaz. We're going to use that no in front of our verb. Spanish speakers often omit the subject pronouns, and this happens because the verb, the ending, indicates who we're talking about. That's why I'm stressing once again. You have to make sure you know who you're talking about to use the correct ending. As long as you're using the correct ending, you're going to know who you're talking about. If I say, trabajo todas las mañanas, I work every morning. How do I know? Because that ending of trabajo is referring to myself. If I say trabajamos, then it means that I'm talking about me, but other people included as well. Now, gustar is a different verb. Gustar is an irregular verb, and we're going to have to remember how to use this itself because this doesn't really follow the form that I'm telling you about, that I'm talking about. So you're going to remember to use me gusta for something that you like and that is singular. You can say me gustan when that is plural. But if you want to make that negative as well, you're going to say no me gusta, talking about something in singular, or no me gustan, talking about in negative but in plural. And we have some examples in here. Me gusta la música clásica. I like music. I like classical music. I'm talking about one kind of music. That's why it's singular, and I'm going to say me gusta. However, if I mention several things, I'm going to make this plural, and I'm going to say me gustan las clases de español y biología. And now I'm talking about two classes. I'm talking about Spanish and biology, so I'm going to use the plural form saying me gustan. A mí me gustan las artes. A mí no me gusta el programa. So then again, whenever we want to use the negative form, we're going to use no in front of me gusta or me gustan based on the thing we're talking about. And finally, here we have some more examples about something that you also can use this along with verbs, not only with nouns. Like in here, we're talking about classes, we're talking about music, but in here we can also say that you don't like to do a specific activity, you don't like dancing, or you don't like studying. So you can also use me gusta or no me gusta plus the infinitive of the verb. Now, we haven't mentioned what's the infinitive of the verb, so I'm going to go a little bit back in here to tell you. The infinitive form of the verb is whenever that verb is not conjugated. Like if in English you say to dance, to look for, to walk, you're not talking about the specific person performing that action. You're just talking about the action randomly. You're not saying that anybody is performing, has performed, or will perform that action. So for example, in here we say bailar, buscar. I'm not talking about anyone in particular. That is the infinitive verb. All of these are infinitive verbs. And you can see in here, some of them go along another verb. For example, in here, necesitar. To need, for example, you need to do your homework. Necesito hacer mi tarea. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So you can see in here, no me gusta viajar. You're conjugating the first verb, so you don't have to conjugate the second verb, because the first one is talking about the person that is performing the action. I don't like to travel. I'm not traveling. I'm just saying I don't like that action. So that is a brief summary of 2.1. Let's go to 2.2. In 2.2, we have forming questions in Spanish, and we have different ways that we can do that. So we have 3 examples here. Let's analyze a little bit more of that. So what you can do is simply, you know that we use upside down question mark in Spanish as well. So we can make statements, we can convert statements into questions. That's why that upside down question mark is so important, because it indicates that a statement can become a question. How do I know that when I speak? I know that by changing the intonation and doing something like this. Ustedes trabajan los sábados. You guys work on Saturdays. Now that is a statement. But I want to ask, because I'm not sure if you guys work on Saturdays. Now I'm going to ask, ¿Ustedes trabajan los sábados? I'm going to raise the ending to indicate I'm asking. ¿Ustedes trabajan los sábados? Versus, ¿Ustedes trabajan los sábados? It's a different way to pronounce that statement that is now a question. Okay? We can also use the inversion. Instead of saying ustedes trabajan, we can use the verb in front of the person, and then that is also going to help me indicate that this is a question. Ustedes trabajan los sábados versus trabajan ustedes los sábados? And you have to keep in mind that we're still using the question marks. At the end, we can also use a question tag that says something like, isn't it? Or are you? So we can use that as well by using something like, ¿Ustedes trabajan los sábados? No. It's like, do you work on Saturdays, don't you? And finally, some question words like a dónde, cómo, cuál, cuáles. And as I'm going to leave this to you to study,